Welcome back to the Building Bigger Lives podcast. I'm Katherine Peterson here with my co host, Michael Regan, and today is another great book club episode. And we're going through a book that's kind of one of the classics, The Gap and the Gain. And it is by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. And we're going to break it down a little bit for you. It's an exciting book that I think will be a great topic for us to dive into today. Welcome in, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, it was exciting to have this one on our agenda because I've been influenced by Dan Sullivan for about 25 years. He runs a company called The Strategic Coach, and a lot of my previous work prior to joining Building Champions was influenced by them. And then Benjamin Hardy was an author introduced to me by our friend Todd Bookspan about, I don't know, 7 years ago. And so I've enjoyed reading a couple of his books. And this one is really a mindset focused book. That's one of the things that drew me to it when you mentioned it as a possible book club episode. And you said, well, have you read it? And I said, I haven't. It's on one of those lists of I need to. And so you spurred me to put that one to the top of the pile. And really the core idea behind this is, that success and happiness is all going to depend on how you measure progress. So you're either going to focus on what you haven't achieved, which is the gap, or you're going to recognize how far you've already come, and that's the gain. So I guess let's start there, because when you think about that definition, what you haven't achieved, or, maybe how far you've already come, describe to me how that impacted you when you read this and you thought about that as a mindset. How did you see yourself in the contrast of the gap and the gain?
It was actually pretty good for me because it seemed to be a different concept that I hadn't heard before. And so many times we compare ourselves to others and we compare ourselves to the market, or we get a lineup of all the loan officers in our area or in our region. And so this was good because it thought I thought to myself, gosh, it just feels frustrating because I'm doing so many things without the results, because that's a little bit how the market is right now. So it kind of said, hey, 5 years ago, where was I and how far have I come with, my knowledge of a P&L or my business building skills or my time efficiency or my team. And so it kind of set the focus differently in my mind. And that's why I loved that difference between the gap and the gain. And you can probably explain that a little bit more to people as far as what that really means between the two of them.
Yeah, because what you described actually is a beautiful example, because I think the gap really exists when you start comparing yourself to some sort of ideal or some sort of future goal, and you feel like you're always falling short. And that's always going to lead people to frustration. It's going to lead them to stress. It's going to lead them to burnout. And I hear these words on coaching calls from time to time. Coach, I'm stressed out, or I'm burnt out. And so if we dig into that, we often find this mindset is in play. You're just comparing yourself to where you think you should be. You use the reference of maybe, based on what others are doing or market conditions. Sometimes it's even just as simple as what I think I should be doing. Like, I'm just frustrated that I'm not where I think I should be. When I can get them to see the gain, they start to measure themselves against their own progress. And that's different. It's exactly what you said. You start looking at how much you've grown. And once that happens, my experience is that starts to build confidence. That starts to build more motivation to keep growing. So instead of thinking, gosh, I haven't earned as much as I set out to earn this year, you start looking and saying, but my income is up 30% over last year at this date. So maybe I am making progress, and that shift is really powerful when someone applies it to things like motivation and confidence. So yeah, I think you've got the right idea of it. So let's dig into the gap specifically, because I think people can see the difference between the two. From your experience, what makes the gap dangerous? Where would you say, "Oof, either personally I've felt that frustration, or I've seen it in play in others and I see the danger"?
Yeah, so there was a sentence in the book, something like it leads to a desperate increase in willpower that can lead to burnout, which is a little bit what you said of just like, oh my gosh, I need to be doing more and I need to be, pushing myself to get to this unrealistic thing. And so, but I think also as you have success, you keep comparing yourself to the next level of success. And
Mm.
so you never actually get there and you never have that sense of peace and fulfillment that I think is really important to that will actually get you to the next level if you can enjoy that sense of peace.
Yeah, that great word to land on there because really that's what I would highlight for folks that are like, okay, the gap, the gain, the gap, I think I get it. It's, I'm setting big goals, but I'm never satisfied. But the cost of that when you really never leave that mindset is the level of stress that compounds, the level of doubt, self-doubt that compounds can really leave people feeling empty. And when
Mhm.
a lot of the folks that listen to our podcast are entrepreneurial people. They started a business or they got into high performance sales in real estate or in mortgage banking. And these folks were hungry. Something motivated them to want to achieve a lot. Maybe because they saw, the career they were in as an opportunity for freedom, or they saw it for an opportunity to have no ceiling on their income potential. But if this is the mindset they've embraced, the level of stress and self doubt when it compounds really does lead to emptiness. And I think they do a great job as authors warning against that and highlighting it. Um, where, instead of focusing on what's missing, they're trying to get you to focus on what's been accomplished. And that goes back to celebrating those small wins. And when you meet a high achiever, and Catherine, you're one of them, so I count you in this crowd, is um, that can be a tough one to swallow at first. Like,
Yeah.
don't tell me about small wins. I want to win big. Nothing about this ideology is telling you to lower your goals. It's telling you how do you measure your progress. That's the key. We're not lowering our goals. We're looking at a way to measure that progress.
One of the things that I keep thinking in my brain as a great example is I've been lifting weights and I've been stuck on because my whole thing in my head was I'm going to add one more every day, like one more rep, right? And I'm kind of to the point where I cannot. Like I'm stuck a little bit. On certain things I can, but on others I just haven't been able to. And I was like, man, I am just not doing well at this whole weight thing and blah blah blah. So I said, okay, wait, hold on. Gap in the gate. I'm going to flip back in my book because I've been keeping track and I'm going to look. And okay, I was doing tiny weights at the same amount of reps. I've gone way up in weights. So look how far I've come. And it did help me say, you know what? If I keep doing this number for a little bit, that's okay. I'm really strong and I'm really a way different person than I was when I started this weightlifting. So I had to totally refocus and say, okay, I don't need to do one more every day. That is a little crazy when you start to think about it. So let me look at how far I've come and see what I can do to continue to go on my journey.
I'm not going to let you get away with crazy on that. That may be an overstatement, but I understand your point. And look, for those of you out there that maybe are listening to Catherine's example, you might be thinking like I am that, oh, okay, that sounds a little bit like Atomic Habits. That 1% more. That's the ideology is don't don't try to make these colossal leaps. Just make small leaps and repeat them over and over and over. What's a great dovetail about what you're doing there is that you're now looking at this through the lens of what's my mindset as I do that. And by focusing on the gains, it really does allow you watch, you'll continue to level up. It's not that this is your plateau. This isn't the
Right.
end of your growth and your strength journey. It's just it allows you to not focus on the defeat or the stress. It allows you to focus on the gain, and that gain is very motivating. And guess what?
Mhm.
You'll start leveling up again. All right, so then let's
Mhm.
talk a little bit more about the power of the gain. I like this. When I feel like we recognize how much we've already progressed, that momentum, that gratitude, that confidence are there. People that track their gains, especially on a daily basis, tend to be happier. They tend to be more productive. They tend to achieve more over time. They tend to have thumb emojis on their Zoom video. Oh, sorry for those of you listening out there. That was a little goofy, but that just happened. So you talked about exercise. Well, how do you handle that? Let's go to the end of the workout routine. Are you doing anything on a daily basis or as you work out to reinforce that gain mindset?
I think this is going to seem strange, but some of it is just writing it down in my win by noon, I'm like, yay, I exercise. So honestly, that gives me a little bit of motivation.
That's
It's
not
small,
strange
but
at
it
all.
works.
It's not strange at all. In fact, that's exactly what the author recommended is writing those things down. And I really did think of Todd and the Win by Noon journal
Hmm.
when I read that as, that's the power of simplicity. So you're writing down your small wins. Is that exactly
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. And honestly, checking that box of exercise when I get to the office in the morning is really, really fulfilling of like, oh, yay, look what I did. I get to check that box off. Um, and that's always a great feeling.
Yeah, I love that example because most people when they hear it think, "Oh, well, I can do that." That's not heavy lifting, no pun intended. That I can actually make that short list and people understand that, especially I think in the high achiever category, we like to visualize that progress. That's why things like a whiteboard work really well. That's why things like a
Mhm.
journal work really well. That's why things like a scorecard work really well. When you start burying your results in your brain, that doesn't
Mhm.
work as well. Your brain
Yeah.
tends to, deposit those in places that are hard to recall when you need them most, especially if you've had an amygdala hijack where you're no longer getting the level of balanced thinking you need at a time when you need it most. So great habit. I hope our audience just caught the simplicity of Catherine's example. Write it down. Just three things you've accomplished in that one day over a period of time. I'll bet you get to go back and look at that journal from time to time and think,
Mhm.
wow, that was a lot more than I realized.
Exactly. Exactly. And then just keeping the exercise journal that I have has really, really helped me with that because you do feel like, oh man, and I need to I really have come far and I need to celebrate that.
Yeah, great example. All right, so then if we're following the author's ideology here, we're embracing the power of the gain. He also describes a way to reframe failure as a gain. And for some folks, that's a stretch. Like they're going to hear that and think, okay, now we're just playing with words. How are you going to reframe failure as a gain? Um, Talk to me about what your reaction was when he talked about shifting these from failures to learning experiences and
Mhm.
depositing them in the gain bank. What was your thinking as you read that?
So that's something I have extensively practiced because I've made a lot of failures and I get pretty good at them. So I think I've brought up in the podcast before, I used to have a failure plan that was in a
You did.
folder that I would pull out and that said like steps to take to basically reframe. It was a different way to reframe that failure. And so I really quickly got to a point where I could reframe a failure very quickly. So that part I was like, oh yeah, I totally get this piece because I think there are so many failures that really end up being gains for our business, gains for us professionally and emotionally. So that one I got for sure.
Yeah, when I read this really triggered for, we talked about this is good, by the way, to reference some of these other authors that we're influenced by because you start to see where these ideologies dovetail. And the one that hit me on this one was Dr. Carol Dweck's work in the book Mindset. And she
Yeah.
describes a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset, very similar to the gap and the gain. And her
Mhm.
ideology reflected exactly what these authors have suggested is, we're not failing. We're simply learning ways that don't work. And sometimes learning ways that don't work are what it takes to actually make the progress. So if your marketing campaign fails, instead of saying, well, that was a waste of time, how about, well, now we know that doesn't work. And I'm closer to figuring out what actually does.
Mm-hmm. Or I needed to have that experience to make a better decision later. Or now I know that instead of needing this on our team, we need that on our team. Or, hey, I need to add a step to the interview process. Or I think all of those are really valuable lessons. You think about all the lessons we learned in, let's say, 2018 to 2021 that have helped us today. So,
Yeah, no question about it. But those lessons are only helpful if we go back and review them. And so your point earlier of writing them down is critical. That's why I also ask you and any client I work with to create a focus plan as we head into the quarter because it requires you to get thoughts out of your head and onto paper so that we're now measuring towards something that wasn't just oh yeah, I think we talked about that or oh yeah, that's a good idea, but there's nothing really committing you to the
Yeah.
activity. Great. Let's put it on paper. That increases the capacity to figure those things out, just like you described, because
Mhm.
it's really hard to have a reframing failure as a gain shift if you don't even have a frame in which there's a context for, well, what are we even measuring? So really, really helpful to get that written down. Okay, so this is good. How about for folks, maybe as we pull this thing all the way around, what about folks who are nodding their heads the whole way? They're listening to us saying, I get the gap and the gain. I see the dangers of the gap. I see the power of the gain. I understand how to reframe failure as a gain. How do I stay in the game? I mean, I'm there. I believe this, but real
Mhm.
life hits me every day, and sometimes it's a T-bone. Like I don't see it coming, and I've got to deal with it. How do I stay in that game? What's been your experience now that you've absorbed the book? What are some of the things that have helped you stay in the game?
I think some things that we've already mentioned, like celebrating the small wins, but then I think there's um, a couple things they mentioned in the book, like gratitude. Hey, here are some things I'm thankful for every morning. Some people have to do it like 5 times a day, and that's okay too. So whatever kind of keeps you in that mindset is great. And then another, I think, great one is staying around gain-minded people. So I heard about this book from Sean McCluskey, and he said that he listens to it about, I think it was like once a quarter, it was frequent. And even doing something like that, if he can see himself slipping, he's switching gears and saying, I need to listen to that book again just to remind me. I think that that's a great thing, is to even be around people who might even be able to recognize it. Because I think as soon as you recognize it, you can make that quick switch. And sometimes having those people in your life that'll be like, hey, wait a minute, what you doing? What's going on? That could be helpful too.
Love that. Yeah. For those of you listening, Sean McCluskey was a guest on our podcast back in 2024. You can go back and find that previous episode if you're interested in hearing a little more from Sean. I know he was a big advocate of another book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And that's another one he re listens to once a year because he
Mhm.
said, I just have to remind myself every year we've got to, really recast into the new year. I can't just camp on what got me here. So that's great to hear that he was able to share that with you. I love that idea of surrounding yourself with gain-minded people. Here's the maybe the dirty little secret of being a full-time coach is this one is awesome for me. Meaning nobody signs up for coaching in the first place that isn't at least
Mhm.
attempting to be gain-minded. That's the whole purpose of coach. They may not have it all figured out, or they may say it's not even that I have it figured out. It's that real life is continuing to jostle me around and I need somebody who can, get me recalibrated. So sometimes I'm like your alignment specialist, with your automobile. It's not that you don't know how to drive, it's that if the wheels aren't straight, it's hard. You get a really different experience without that. So as a coach, I'm surrounded by you and other growth-minded people, so that is really helpful for me. So I'm glad you mentioned the gain-minded aspect of that. Another one that I think was powerful that I read from the author was how to measure your progress backward, not forward. And I had to really pause on this one to recognize the simplicity of that truth.
Mhm.
If I look at my plans, they're often anchored toward a vision I have of the future.
Mhm.
And that gap that exists between the vision and my current reality is often where I design my plans. I have a strategy, I have tactics, I set goals, I have accountability. I want to close that gap, right? So here we're talking about the gap and the gain. But the gain mindset isn't telling me not to do that. The gain mindset is saying just make sure you're not measuring the distance of the gap. Make sure you're measuring the progress you made from 3 months ago or 6 months
Mhm.
ago or a year ago. That measuring backwards is key. And so I hope people heard that now a couple of times on this podcast is this is not a book about lowering your expectations. This is not a book about setting soft goals. This is a book about how to create a winning mindset when you're really pressing hard into these big goals, these big gaps, and you don't want to slip into burnout. You don't want to slip into frustration. So you need a mindset that works, and that measurement of measuring your progress backward really resonates with me. It's certainly true when you look at things like, you look at your financial reports that you get maybe from your investment accounts. They tell you regularly, that past performance doesn't dictate future results. So all you can really do is look at the growth you've
Mhm.
had and attempt to make the adjustments that you need toward the goals that you've set. So why wouldn't I do that in the rest of my business? I like it.
Yeah. So I have a question as a coach. What are some things someone could add into their daily disciplines or their focus plans to say, hey, how can I spend more time in the gain? What would you recommend on that side to look, to compare or not? We don't want to use the word compare, but to basically measure.
Yeah. Yeah. Comparison is definitely a tough word, whether it is with others or against your own expectations. Here's what I would say simply, and it's one that I'm surprised people miss, even though we talk about it regularly, is we often do a lot of really great work with things like our personal and our professional development plans. We call that a life plan and a business vision, right? We have these documents. They serve as a really great reminder of keeping us on course. But I'm surprised at how regularly I hear from people, oh, yeah, I need to pull that back out. Oh, yeah, I haven't looked at that in a long, oh, I haven't updated that in a couple of years. And that would be, as a coach, my first recommendation is when you're regularly um, doing that measurement as you're realigning with the destinations you've set in your life, personally and professionally, you're much more likely to close that gap more efficiently and therefore enjoy the gain. That's going to happen. It's when you it'd be like setting a course in your app, in your GPS app for a destination, and then somewhere in the middle of that journey, just turning it off, then getting lost, and then being frustrated that you're lost. Well, your tool that you plugged this address in was designed to help you. In fact, it'll even help you recalibrate if you get off course, how to get back on course. That would be my number one tip, Catherine, is don't discount the power of the investment you've made in your personal development plan or your professional development plan. Those long-term vision exercises are great at keeping you in alignment so that you really can embrace the gain mindset and not get lost in the gap.
Hmm. That's great tips. All right. Well, what other takeaways do you have from the book? And I would say one thing just to make everyone aware, where the book is a fast read. So it's something
Yeah.
you can pick up and knock out really quickly if you just want to get yourself realigned, like a chiropractor appointment, let's say. But that's kind of what I think of this book as, is a little
Yeah.
bit of, hey, let's get back on course. So, Michael, what are your ending thoughts on this book?
Look, if you're a high achiever as a business owner or as a sales professional, and you've ever felt stuck chasing goals that you just can't seem to close on, maybe you're not enjoying the success that you've already had. Eh, you've been sent to the president's club and you come back just thinking, big deal. I'm not even close to where I want to be. This is the book for you. It will help you see what is possible by embracing nothing different than a mindset. You don't have to change who you are. You don't have to change your goals or your plans. You just need to change your mind. If the way you reframe, the power of mindset has been proven over and over again to be maybe one of the most important things that we have in life that we really fail to exercise. And in my mind, this book is just a great reminder. And I guess my last thought on it as a book is I want to be reading books that regularly remind me. You called it chiropractic. I want to be realigned. I don't want to stray from proven truths, whether those truths are, rooted deep within the soul of us as individuals, or proven through the exercise of brain science. Like, I'm willing to follow the proof, and sometimes I just need something that keeps me anchored to that truth and reminded that, okay, I'm doing better than I realized, and I don't want to quit now. So, yeah, my takeaways were, if that's you, if you're a high achiever feeling frustrated, stuck, maybe not enjoying your success, this will be an excellent chiropractic adjustment.
And the version I listened to had both the co-authors chatting after each chapter and breaking it down a little bit and applying it, a little bit differently. And that was really fun because it was almost like listening to a podcast after you listen to the written book. So that was fun. So if you're interested, pick up that version of it on, the Audible or one of those
That's real.
sources.
I love that tip, Catherine, because often, because I am just, an old school hard copy book guy, but I have my Audible subscription. And that's literally what I'll do is after I've read a book, and I've maybe earmarked the things or highlighted the things that I really want to take out of that book, it's really fun to go back and re-listen to it maybe 90 days down the road. It's like revisiting it, just like you said, with the author's inflections or maybe their little nuances that weren't written in the book, but it's like a commentary on what
Mm.
they wrote. That's a great suggestion. Highly recommended for those of you listening. Great tip from Coach Catherine Peterson. Way to go.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Building Bigger Lives. Today we had another book club and went through The Gap and the Gain. If there's a book that you would love us to cover, we would certainly love to hear from you on what your favorite book might be that you'd love us to dive into. You can find us on all of your podcast sources, along with Instagram and YouTube. And also, Michael will post the episodes on LinkedIn, so you can always find us there as well. Thanks so much for listening. Hope you shared this episode. Hope you enjoyed today.